Baruch atah Eloheinu asher divrei Torah. Praise to you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who's made us holy with your commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah. So, we are back in Pirkei Avot, chapter 4. As a recap, we start off with Ben Zoma saying, who is wise, one who learns from everyone, who is mighty, one who subdues their evil inclination, who is rich, one who is happy with what they have, and who is honored, one who honors others. Then we went to Ben Azai, who said that, quote, minor commandments and, quote, major commandments are all important, and doing one good thing leads to doing another good thing. And when you make one poor choice, that makes it more likely that you'll make another poor choice. From there, Ben Azai also said, everybody has their time and everything has their place. So be aware of that and do not underrate the importance of anything. Rabbi Levitas said that everybody's going to die, so don't be too full of yourself. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka said that even if you think you're getting away with something in private, it's probably going to get exposed at some point. So be on good behavior whether or not you think anybody's watching. And that was 1800 years before cell phones could videotape you. Then Rabbi Ishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan, said that if you learn in order to teach, you get the opportunity to learn and to teach. If you learn in order to do, you get to learn and teach and do. And Rabbi Tzadok said that you shouldn't use the Torah as a way to make yourself be important. If being important comes from how you use the Torah, it's okay if that's a byproduct, but that should not be your goal. Then Rabbi Yossi said, if you honor the Torah, you're more likely to be honored by others. If you dishonor the Torah, you're also likely to be dishonored by others. And Rabbi Ishmael said that if you refrain from judgment, which, as we discussed, could either mean from being a judge, from judging others in your personal going about your daily business life, or from being judged by others, then you rid yourself of enmity, robbery, and false swearing. And if you treat the judicial process lightly, whether that is as a judge or as somebody who is being judged, then you are foolish, wicked, and arrogant. And so this brings us to today's saying, also by Rabbi Ishmael. Justin, would you read this, please?
He used to say, do not render decisions alone, for none may judge alone save one. And say not accept my view, for they are free to coerce, but not you. So this is more Rabbi Ishmael, son of Rabbi Yossi. How are these sayings relevant to our lives today?
Thank you.
Well, two heads are better than one. You usually get a better decision if you have multiple inputs, although you can only have one person making the decision.
Now I know what prompted your discussion question, David.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, right?
I love when things just kind of follow along.
Yeah, that's good.
What's that second part of the saying mean?
I
What's
think
turn to go?
well before I give my thoughts on the matter, I'll throw the question back out to the group. What do you guys think it means?
Do not render decisions alone, for none may judge alone sin. And say not.
I think the comment that Phil made, kind of addresses this in one way, is that, if you have other people rendering decisions with you, you either share the credit or share the blame.
How does this refer to a king who does make decisions alone?
Well, the first sentence seems to say that there's only one absolute judge who has absolute may be absolutely correct in the judgment, and that one is capitalized there in the sentence. So I think we know to whom or to what entity the rabbi was referring. And nobody may have a monopoly or be absolutely sure that their view is correct. There may be other folks who are free to think as they wish.
But the part like at the end, it goes, except, so don't tell people except my view, because they're free. They're free people. They can do what they want, but not
Correct.
you. So what I'm confused, I guess.
Who is the you that was not free?
The judges are the ones who are not free because they're public servants. And in the context of this period when the Sanhedrin was active, they were very important civil servants as well, because they also administered the state, but before Roman domination, the state, and after it, just Jewish society in general. Whereas everybody else, the common population, since they did not have the place of scholars, were not necessarily bound to the same expectations. Maybe, or am I misreading something? That was my thoughts. I don't know.
I just ask to ask you, David, to explain the phrase there. I see so many different translations, and I don't understand it. The last part there, free to coerce and so on.
So when might this come up in a modern situation where you shouldn't say, accept my view, for they are free to coerce or to try to impose their view, but you shouldn't impose yours?
Or maybe they're saying you are not free. If they are free, but you are not free, but not you to coerce, so you shouldn't be you are not in the position to coerce. Whatever that,
David, because that whole thing about coerce, it's in parentheses in the English. In the Hebrew, is that an accurate translation? Because throwing coerce, and that's a very strong word in this context, because the rest of this verse seems kind of neutral. And that coerce is like putting a heavy hammer on it. So I'm just kind of curious, what is that an accurate translation to your mind of what it would be in the Hebrew?
Probably. I don't know enough to say definitively one way or the other. But I will give you a definite probably on that.
Okay. Because coerce, I don't know, it's something, I mean, you can convince other people about which side of an issue you may be on, or what the right side is, that sort of thing. And that's what our whole political system is based on. But introducing that word or including the word coerce is almost something negative. And I'm just wondering how that changes the meaning of what otherwise to me seems like kind of a very neutral, straightforward concept.
So how would it be different if it wasn't in there?
Well, that you can have a different opinion. It's okay to have a different opinion, but coerce usually means taking some kind of action to change somebody's opinion. That's what I'm getting from it.
I understand coerce is to force or to pressure somebody, which is different than convincing them.
Yeah, it's more active. It's more intrusive.
So David just asked what it's like without it. And so with it, I get what Charles was saying. Whenever he said, accept my view, for they are free to coerce, but not you. So it's saying that they're free to coerce you, but you should not do that. I get that. But then if you take out coerce completely, then it goes, for they are free, but not you. So what exactly is that saying? Is that talking on a more spiritual side or a more, is it just talking about decisions in general? Like they're free to change their mind, but you're not, or I'm just, that's why I was asking the question. I'm not sure.
I'm puzzled. I have a translation in front of me. Maybe I didn't make this clear before. That says authority. They have the authority. I can see how they got that. I don't know about the coercion, but either way, the thought is, and it fits it all together, is that judges are supposed to rule, to make judgments in panels of 3 or maybe sometimes more, as with the Sanhedrin, I guess, which is typical in some places also of judging. And in our appeals courts in this country, for what it's worth, it's almost always a group, and it's because, as it's pointed out before, supposedly multiple heads are better, and they can discuss it among themselves. And it seems to be a strict rule that the judgments should come down collectively from a court that has to make a decision that they agree on, or at least the majority agree on, so that no one can dominate.
Well, they have different perspectives and different experiences. So that may be why it's helpful to have, or someone who just has a particular philosophy he wants to put forward. So it's good to have, you say, more than one person to balance it off.
So I just looked up Rasha'in, the word in the Hebrew, because so in the Hebrew it says Shahain Rasha'in velo ata, which literally translates to because they something and not you. And Jastrow, Marcus Jastrow wrote a Talmudic dictionary where he looked at every word in the Talmud and all the different places where permutations of it came up and figured out what it meant in each context. And so based off of the other places where this root comes up, it appears to be having to do with permission or power. So either they are permitted but not you, for they have power but not you. So depending on whether you go with the permitted approach to this word, then that would be for they are free. If you go with for they have power, then that gets closer to coercion.
David, in the Schottenstein edition, there's a footnote that gives a little bit of explanation. It says, on your own, rather always endeavor to be part of a tribunal, so you will be able to discuss all aspects of the case and render proper judgment. If you are in the minority, do not insist that your colleagues give in to you, for they are the majority and can impose their will, and you must accede to it.
So that's picking up on the plural versus the singular
I believe so.
here, and seeming to suggest that in a situation where there's a they and there's a you, then presumably the they outnumbers you, and are on a different. They are together, but you are by yourself, meaning that they are the majority and you are the minority.
And the Hebrew doesn't distinguish between plurality and singular to that.
The Hebrew does.
Right.
Does.
Yeah, Hain is the plural they, and Atah is the singular you.
Okay.
I found another translation that says, for none may judge alone save one, and say not accept my view, for they are free, but not you.
Yeah.
So the majority is free to make a decision, but you as an individual may not.
It almost sounds like that one, whoever that person is, doesn't even have a vote. It's like you can have your opinion, but it really doesn't matter whether you have one, because these other people are going to make it null and void or something. I mean, it almost encourages you not to have an opinion. Because
Are we talking about opinions here? Is it actually a group of people that are rendering a judgment over some technicality, legality, or some violation or infringement upon certain norms or laws that it's just not clear?
Yeah, right.
Well,
Yeah.
that also brings up that, it specifically says render decision in this, which is traditionally for law. And I think render decision means to like announce a decision. It's not just to decide something, it's to like announce that decision, I think.
Or issue it, or produce it,
Yeah.
formalize.
Brings to mind our Supreme Court, though, where a minor opinion is accepted in terms of being allowed to be voiced. And this sort of indicates that shouldn't be the case. I am interpreting it correctly.
You mean a dissenting opinion though, right?
Yes, well, that would be the minor opinion.
Right. But what I'm saying, so what you're saying is this would discourage that.
Well, I mean, kind of like what Carol was saying, that, by yourself, you don't have that ability, but as a group, possibly, if you're part of the group, then you might have that, maybe.
But my point is, as the other gentleman was saying, within the context of what? If in what the actual situation was then, how judgments were rendered, or how decisions were made. So maybe we're applying how we would look at things today, whereas this is based on a different set of norms or customs.
Would the commandments be any part of this as a guide? So that there's already a written law, in quotes, and you can have discussions about how you might judge it, but it's in a way you already have a guide to go with, so. So your opinion is only, or your judgment is only as good as it fits what is morally acceptable by the commandments. Or did I just add another confusing piece?
As what's troubling to me is it saying if you are in the minority, you should not or cannot try to convince others of your viewpoint. But if the ones who are in the majority can try to convince you, but kind of what that means is if you're in the minority and you have a strong opinion, why not give them the ability to try to convince the majority? They may not do it, but to say you can't do it, it is troubling, particularly in the sense of a tribunal of some sort.
Wouldn't it perhaps then only maybe refer to the actual practical implications of what opinion wins out rather than necessarily just discussing them? Because as far as I understand, the halacha transmitted by the same people who produced this also would follow the principle of following the majority generally in legal cases, unless there's some kind of reason for dissenting. Is that perhaps part of this, David, in terms of a connection?
It seems likely that this has to do with majority versus minority as far as a final decision. I'd also raise a question as to whether or not it makes a difference that says coerce versus convince. I'll just drop that in the conversation and let you guys ponder that.
Minority were to say, you must accept my opinion or else something bad will happen, would that be coercion?
I mean, that'd 100% be coercion, but as Gabriel was kind of saying was, if this is more along the lines of a tribunal of, rabbis, that they all come together, they make their decision, and, there's a dissenting vote, but that person, so I think that if, from what Gabriel was saying, that person, the dissenting vote can't say, well, everybody has to accept my opinion because, he was outvoted, but I think more in a legal type case.
Would this also be relevant in a non-legal situation?
Mhm.
Hasn't this whole chapter been revolving around legal decisions?
Some of it has. Some of it talks about legal decisions, but even those that we've seen so far could also be viewed in viewed through the lens of non-legal situations.
Sure, it could apply if you're with a group of friends and you say, you know, let's go to a restaurant and you're trying to figure out where. And if the majority wants to go to one place and you don't, you know, if you want to be part of the group and be a good friend, you're going to go along.
Yeah.
You know, as the classic Houston rabbi, Mr. Rogers said, Kenny Rogers said, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, Justin, you and I'm thinking about things when I do, and you probably have the same thing when you're developing. I don't know, with your type of engineering work, where you're developing a design and you have to satisfy a number of different participants in an organization with what they need. I know it happens to me all the time, and I just thinking of one major thing where I was just reconditioning an empty shell of a building, and we were going to have different industrial activities in it, and who had what space and where everybody's going to be, and how do you balance off everybody's needs, and so space and accommodating equipment and movements. And there's always someone wants a little bit more than the other, and what do they need? So I have to get them in a room and have a discussion, and we have to talk about it. This is what you need. That's what I need. How we can account yes, no, and sometimes it would have to come to the point where I say, this is it. I don't have any more money to spend, and you're asking for pie in the sky. I can't do this. So you're going to have to cut back and adjust. But I have to keep everybody happy, and there's just the whole politics of the situation, the company. And if everybody's fighting and nothing gets done, I was the one who would have the problem. Instead, I got to come through with a product. That happens to you all the time, right?
Right.
That same thing.
Exactly.
So you have somehow or another, you know, I was the project manager, but I still had to have everybody come to an agreement. If not, I would not be successful in keeping everybody happy and having the thing conclude successfully. A product that would satisfy everybody's needs in the company. So, I mean, I can see that it's applicable. I just have to everybody has a different opinion, their own particular perspective. They understand some aspects of the operations better than I do, because they're the ones that are actually executing those operations. So they're the specialists. So I have to trust their opinions. And there's so many specialties in anything. Now you've got to rely on the specialists for these things. You can't be an expert. I can't be an expert in everything. There may be somebody. I'm not, but I'm not Mr. Musk. So.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, right.
So I can see that. That's an example of what happens, David, asking every day. Taylor, I've said enough for tonight.
Why would these two parts be in the same saying?
I don't know.
Because the you in here is an individual, and it tells you no one should judge alone.
If it says, if he's given the advice that no one should judge alone, then you have to have some rules or parameters for how to judge in a group.
As was said earlier, it's about collective decision-making, and the second part seems like a kind of corollary to the first. You can't I think you can raise your point within the group. That's a different issue, a subsidiary issue. But when the group makes a decision, you have to go along with it if you're going to be part of the judging panel.
Either that or they'll leave they'll leave you behind. Not only go along, they'll leave you behind. Some instances that.
Maybe this is the way to avoid having 2 Jews and 3 opinions.
Yeah, which, again, that's Carol.
Maybe somebody knew something. That was coming. I mean, it feels to me like it almost encourages you not to have any opinion. Just, or that your opinion doesn't matter, or your judgment, your thoughts about a decision that needs to be made, or whatever word you want to use for that. But it says, maybe it's just also saying, don't be a chacham, don't be so wise that you think your decision is the only one that would matter. And you have to learn to be, like Charles was saying, you have to learn to work out a problem as a group. And there's so many ways to look at it. It just, I don't think there's any one good answer. When I think about parenting, I mean, if you're a single parent, for example, and you have a problem with a child that you need to deal with, you certainly are going to ask for help, but in your gut, sometimes you just know what needs to be done or what you think needs to be done. And you make a singular decision that you feel is a judgment that is the right thing to do for your child. And you may not agree with someone else who says that's not the way to handle it. I'm not talking about medical issues necessarily, but you know your child and you know how they react, and you're not going to ask, you're going to make the decision on your own. So you have to make decisions alone once in a while.
So in which circumstances would you agree with Rabbi Ishmael, and which circumstances for either part, and which circumstances would you disagree? Seeing as how he cannot tell you to accept his view.
I think you always have to make your own point, but have an open mind to the way others think and speak who have different experiences. And so when you put them all together, that's how you get the kugel, a good kugel. And you can't be just a stiff board. You may be right, but there are other things that you've not experienced that can affect the decision of the group, and that is best for everyone. But if you don't agree, if you can't agree, I think you need to sit back and think about how you could change the system. And it takes time. Look at all the hundreds of thousands of years we've gone through, and we still fight for what?
I think your question on when to not agree with Rabbi Ishmael, I think Carol said it pretty succinctly. As a parent, sometimes you just know, like you got that gut feeling and you know that maybe the decision that was come to by a group of judges or something, you know that that's wrong, and so you can't agree with that. So
Yeah, when do you not follow orders?
Just the way it says, but not you, is so aggressive. Like, you better not do that. Or you're not entitled to do that. Or don't you dare do that. That's how I'm reading it.
This reminds me of some of those old cowboy western movies where the whole town wants to hang a man without a trial because they think he's the one who killed somebody. And then comes along the single lawman who says, no, you can't do that. You need a trial first. So you have the majority who may not be in the right, but does the person who believes is in the right then back away and let things happen that shouldn't?
That's because they're not a court, they're a mob, and they don't have the authority. And he recognizes that, and we hope shows them that they have to wait for a procedure to be followed. I think it's more about the procedure perhaps, but because you don't know whether the substance of the decision is correct.
Pretty much for 50 minutes, we're not able to render a decision.
Absolutely.
In courts may take weeks.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's only 3 lines.
Well, it talks to how complicated life has become. Think about Adam and Eve. They had it pretty easy, and yet they spoiled their days by stepping out of what was permitted for them. And yet the world kept growing and growing, and people learned and split and come back, and some never have their minds or hearts open enough to want to learn what other people feel and understand. I think that's the most important thing we can get from this. You have to understand others, and at the time, do that which is best. Not necessarily because it's voted on best, but because there's no other alternative where everybody can agree to disagree or agree not to agree at all. That's all I can say. There has to be some good in everything that we think about and plan to do as people together. And if we don't, then we're always at war. That's pretty bad. I don't like to fight. But I will cooperate if I think it has value.
I'll share a story from the Talmud that seems relevant to the saying. There was a disagreement over an oven that belonged to a guy named Achnai about whether the oven could be used in certain situations based off of how the oven was put together. And in Hebrew, the word for oven is tanor, so sometimes this episode is referred to as tanor shel Achnai. And all the sages thought one way, and Rabbi Eliezer thought the other way. And Rabbi Eliezer said, look, I am certain that I'm right about this. And to prove that I'm right, let the carob tree that is outside our study hall window get up and move 10 feet to the side. And the carob tree got up and moved 10 feet to the side. And Rabbi Joshua said, meh, you can't prove anything from a carob tree. All right, fine. If I'm right, said Rabbi Eliezer, let the stream run the other way. And the stream ran the other way. And Rabbi Joshua was like, so the stream ran the other way. So what? All right. If I'm right, let the walls of the study house start to come inward to prove that I'm right. And the walls of the study house start to come inward, which I always envisioned being kind of like the trash compactor scene in Star Wars. And Rabbi Joshua rebukes the walls and says, walls, what business do you have interfering with the discussions of scholars? And so the walls stop leaning inward out of respect for Rabbi Joshua, but they don't go back out of respect for Rabbi Eliezer. And finally, Rabbi Eliezer is so frustrated that he says, if I'm right, let a bat kol, a divine voice, tell you that I'm right. And at that moment, everybody hears God say, he's right. What else do you want? And Rabbi Joshua has the chutzpah to say to God, according to your Torah, God, you said, lo b'shamayim hi, it is not in the heavens. You gave the Torah to us, so stay out of our business. And the decision was made according to the majority. Later on, the story goes on, one of the other rabbis who was there happened to run into Elijah. And he asked Elijah, what was God's reaction when Rabbi Joshua told him that? And Elijah reported, God laughed and said, my children have defeated me. My children have defeated me. So Rabbi Joshua took a quote from the book of Deuteronomy, Parshat Nitzavim, where it says, you shouldn't say the Torah is like so far away that we can't approach it, we can't do anything with it, it's not for us. It's not in the heavens that you should say, it's so far away, who's going to go there and get it for us? It's not across the seas. So Rabbi Joshua was taking a very selective quote from the Torah, taking it out of context and using it to say it's not in the heavens, therefore that must mean it's up for us to make decisions. But that would be an example that Rabbi Ishmael may have been thinking about as regards to this business of coercing others versus having the majority make their decision, even if you don't agree with it.
I was just going to add one thing in another vein is sort of like the physicians have to say, first, do no harm. Maybe there's a message here that you want to make sure that what you do is not going to hurt somebody else. So it's best for a bunch of people to discuss it and come up with an approach that won't do harm in whatever decision. And I'm done.
Very nice.
David, does that mean God is not able to coerce humanity? Seems to me he did that a few times in the times of the Torah.
Given that the U is not capitalized, this may imply that God is free to coerce, but not you humans. All right. Noting the time, I'm going to stop the recording.